So a few years ago, I made a video on why Elsa was a bad character, something that's been broadly covered by a lot of people before, but with some important takes that fit who the character was originally meant to be, because she does remain to be one of the most, if not the most popular modern Disney animation character they have ever created, thanks to songs like Let It Go with ice powers and the depending on who you ask being very beautiful. But besides that, the point of this was the fact that in the world of Frozen, with all of its issues, the main problem stood to be Elsa. She really did not make the greatest choices ever, mostly because she was a bad character. And when I made that video, I argued that it wasn't the fact that she was a bad character, but how she was the bad character that was meant to be, as in the original villain of the film. That of course was the basis of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, which had the Snow Queen as the main antagonist to protagonists like Kai. So the logic was that it was to be clear to make her the villain, like many past villains have ever done, one with magical powers, control over domains, with the scrappy younger heroes going after them like Anna represented. She was the main hero of that journey on that part and actually healed her villainous sister. But then Let It Go changed it all, making Elsa more nuanced and a good-hearted person who dealt with trauma, and delegating the villain role to other characters whom I really don't like talking about this much. But then it was also Frozen 2's fault for actually making her the bad character in that way, creating her as the hero of this story who goes on this journey through such a mess, chasing a voice, becoming the fifth spirit, and leaving Arendelle to become the protector of the forest. Or how conspiracy theorists could love to say that how this somehow contributes to her becoming the Snow Queen from the novel. Not really that last part, to be honest. I just came up with that as a thought that many people probably would have had in the context of how you're getting Frozen 3 and 4. Like, where is she going to go after that? Probably a much greater role, and I see it more like the Snow Queen that was in the original novel. Which is why you're probably asking by now, why am I revisiting this again? Why do something you already talked about a lot? Well, it actually has to do with something you probably wouldn't have expected, and that, my friend, is politics. And before you leave, just because you're probably thinking, oh my god, why is this Disney reviewer talking about politics? You should probably hear me out. Because I'm not talking about real-world politics at all. Well, sort of kind of in this context, but I'm more talking about Elsa's role as queen and why Frozen 2 ruined a lot of that for her, and how the foundations of their family are built on narrow, logical grounds. So technically what I'm saying this video is about is how Elsa and her family are not very good royals. That's why this video has to be framed that way, since it's more on the bad reasons that the filmmakers are doing here to the franchise that I don't think is a good thing. Since most of the fairy tales and contents at Snow White in Disney do actually teach good lessons and in some fashion, yet never do something as bad as what they do in terms of the structure here. Now I also can bet you're probably asking why I'm talking about governance in a Disney movie, since realistically none of it actually makes sense from the beginning, and nobody actually should care about that, especially if you look at stories like Cusco's Rule, which is a straight F and on purpose a narcissistic leader who shouldn't be ruling at all. Well, that can be true on that fact, but then again most Disney fairy tales do follow their rules in at least some basic governance, even if some kingdoms don't really make any sense. However, Frozen has so many contradictions in its story and is built that way that it makes you wonder why the hell does this kingdom even exist? And in an age where you grow up and get used to systems of politics of power to the politics of life or history, since Frozen's period takes place in the 1840s by most accounts, one which saw the historical 1848 revolutions in Europe, you gotta start asking the obvious. And I made it a lot known how much I hate this royal family in particular, much over Elsa and Anna's parents the most, because of their personal choices that made Elsa the way who she was and how Frozen turned out as such because of their direct actions themselves. All the while Frozen 2 ignored that issues and actually tried to paint them as a noble family trying to help and bridge their worlds after the actions of their grandfather that nobody knew about until the end of the frickin' film. Like, one word the structure of the kingdom of Arendelle is that of a hereditary absolute monarchy. There's no parliament or other structure here, so most decisions are made by the monarch on screen, starting with Runard. For example, this starts with a simple and underdeveloped story of the king who was paranoid about magic and wanted to build a dam to prevent that power from threatening him or whatever reason, personally murdering their leader so nobody would know about it, but then died in turn, and how the spirits punished and trapped the remaining troops with the Nathodra there. Then you had Agnar, his son, who grew up guided by some unknown regency council that has no explanation or seen visually and becomes king, marrying Iduna, who was a secret Nathodra who saved him and had 2 daughters, and from there they raised them in the worst possible way and die at sea. Now this is a basic generalization, but here I'm trying to get the point of where you're starting to realize the structure of the kingdom that doesn't seem quite as good, where decisions are made on a whim. That's what you'll see here, that the monarchy of Arendelle is basically a trauma cycle where the people of Arendelle suffer the most. But of course, in typical Disney fashion, what you'll see on screen, they all accept it with a smile like they're all Olafs and are stupid about life's greatest mysteries. So where we start with Elsa here is the fact that after her parents die, she has to wait 3 years for a dramatic effect until she becomes coronated. Sure, some people have tried to explain this by using books or lore or even theories of what happened in that period, like how Agnar had this dude named Lord Peterson to help or a regency council, but if you stick by regular movie logic as what we see on screen, while even noting past Disney films had princes or princesses have living breathing parents of kings and queens during their adventures, nothing really adds up unless you stretch what you can fill yourselves rather than what the filmmakers didn't even bother to add in. And for real facts, Elsa was about 18 when her parents died. And in realistic matters of that same time period was the fact of those like Queen Victoria, who after her 18th birthday became queen and had her coronation a year later. The point brought up here was the fact that she was of age and became the ruler. She didn't need to wait 3 years to become 21 or become the queen, as most metrics put 18 as an adult. But yeah, sure, you could say you can wait that period for a story sense and not mind it at all. No story has to follow such realistic rules, but when you leave that long of a time gap of 3 years with such people that could be there, a regency or whatever, you're making a big assumption on the audience to accept that or not, based on how the facts of how did she cope with it within those 3 years, who was guiding her and why didn't she change, and how did things just blow up by the time we went to the scene at the ballroom. Just like my facts of how Elsa and Anna were raised by Agnar and Iduna, where nothing changed. No blame was really passed on by them at the end of the film, and where it felt like a cycle of nobody taking full responsibility except for themselves. The point being here is that leading is a very important responsibility to take seriously and not take lightly, and Frozen does take a lot of things more lightly than any other Disney movie has ever done. Because unlike the other films, Frozen is a full, well-rounded look at a kingdom and their people or society, and yet does the worst job at it. So this part is not criticizing the actions she does in Frozen, that's important for that story, but how it's handled in between or after. You see this coronation right here, and then she's revealed with her powers and the plot plays out where the bigger story issue is how it easily could have been taken over. Hans' plan, if he succeeded, could have wiped out all the royal sisters and left them with no effectual leader for Arendelle other than this prince from another kingdom who has no real right to rule Arendelle, which is really to say how much bad their system was, where the entire kingdom structure of governance could have been easily usurped within a day, but didn't because of the heartwarming lesson that needed to be done. Where the bigger problems come after this, where comes the fact of Elsa's 3 years of period of rule before the events of Frozen 2. The kingdom, the people accepted her after her little spat, and things apparently ran smoothly in the shorts as we've seen, until of course the second film came. And Frozen 2 gets a lot of shit for good reason on stuff we previously mentioned, but how this is the bigger point of why I wanted to make this video. At the start, things seem fine. Elsa's content with ruling over the people seem to love her, the kingdom and all events seem stable. But then we get the call to action and go on the journey that requires answering the spirits or the mysterious voice in order to stop Arendelle's mysterious destruction because of the magical dam that was built. That later, after they search for safety reasons, she has to go alone to Atahallen to find the voice, discovering it was her mother and the truth of the dam, where she is revealed after she saved Arendelle to her sister that she was the fifth spirit, the one where she goes off, abdicates the throne, and makes Anna the new queen to become the protector of the enchanted forest. That she leaves on this line where she herself said she took an oath to protect Arendelle and then chooses this path of Anna to become a queen.
I took an oath to always do what's best for Arendelle. Luckily, I know just what that is.
And this right here, my friends, is straight stupid. Because again, she took an oath to Arendelle as queen and protector, yet chose the easy way out because she was the fifth spirit and thought her sister is set up to rule now. This is infuriatingly bad because she was ruler for 3 years and didn't think until this very moment that this job was not for her. As we explained previously, this is an absolute monarchy by all definitions of the kingdom. Only rulers with power are the kings and queens mostly here. There is no parliament, no legislative or executive powers, and no judicial matters other than their own. Of course, weird of me to complain in a Disney movie, but that's just how it is because my maturity has made me more civic-led. It just makes sense to question this now, and it's very obvious here by all metrics. Again, Elsa did this for reasons of being the fifth spirit and balancing with 2 daughters of Iduna, where she goes off in the forest and the other leads of the people. Like on the surface, sure, it seems noble, but this is Frozen 2, the movie that had so many problems with its confusing plot, so it does not make sense. Anna was not set up for this role at all, neither in the first or the second film. Her role was to support Elsa to be who she is and this is not the way, with our own coronation being shorter or less unlike how Elsa did it back in Frozen 1, like it just happened within a snap without all the dignitaries or pomp that the original came with or the protocol that is required in a coronation. Like they even contradicted their own rules into making this film. But the bigger part of this, because I mentioned oath, is the fact that she swore as leader of Arendelle to protect your people. Your job and duty is to the people who live in your kingdom. That's always been the role of any world leader we see today. They are there to serve the nation until their term is up, until other issues. And Elsa only ruled for 3 years, which is shorter than that of one term of a president who swears their oath to the Constitution of the United States to protect it. This is something we hear at each inauguration, and that is coded since the beginning of Washington's first term. No world leader should be abdicating or leaving for such reasons, and especially within Arendelle. And as you note, the only leaders of effective governance is that of the family itself. And for one to leave mean there isn't much left in the pool now other than Anna, and one has to see if she's going to have kids with Kristoff to even continue such a line. This is a legit question because who else is going to rule Arendelle? There isn't much to do, and we saw how paralytic this system could be, with Hans almost accomplishing what he did in the first film and becoming leader by default because nobody else was left to trust but this man who showed up and had even a remote royal cred. Like, what exactly are you trying to show people here by doing this? It's not good, and it's another thing of why I wanted to talk about this, of why Elsa is bad or sucks, because her leaving sets a bad precedent or message to kids. This isn't to say that the core roots are bad in defining voices or the spirits in that way. That's a good message, but where she comes from and who she is starting as queen and leaving in the forest to delegate the queen powers to her sister is such a terrible message. In what way is that something that happens very often? Never really. You don't leave and delegate other stuff to your younger siblings. It doesn't work like that in this frame, especially within the kingdom that has real power such as this one family. And what I have to say here is, how is it good to have her leave for kids to see? There are people who live in Arendelle that trusted her as leader for 3 years after this spat as ruler. Again, in Frozen, we saw the effects and initial reactions to her fearful ice powers, but she solved that by the end and the people accepted her. That was a good message there, very heartwarming, and things look good by the ending. But Frozen 2 completely flipped that at the tail end for her to leave. There was no warning for her, nor want of her character to leave Arendelle up to her sister. It just doesn't make sense. There is also no reason you can't be a protector of the Force and still be Queen of Arendelle. It's not like these things are far away, especially as Queen, as the leader to make treaties and agreements with faraway places. Plus, all of this shit began because her granddad built a dam against the nostalgia for power reasons or whatever, and she was gifted this power by the spirits to atone for that mistake. But her parents failed and other people failed. And remember, being a leader requires focus and attention. It's not up to a person to leave no matter the circumstance. There has been past history, but that has shown that leaders that have abdicated have shown mixed reactions by the people, or worse for those before. Yet the thing is, for them like Edward VIII, he was a ceremonial monarch by the time where power was vested in the parliament. Arendelle doesn't have that choice. They have a queen, and that's basically it by what we know. There isn't anything else in that kingdom, which is tinier than a city, that can run on such a traumatic family with personal issues. And that's how bad things honestly are here, and you cannot unsee that no matter who you are. Like, what are you trying to tell people if you could just get up and leave if a voice calls to you? It doesn't make sense because you didn't provide any pathway to that. Like, what does it say if an elected leader gets into office and then 3 years later says, I want to leave because a voice is calling to me? What would the people's reactions be to something like that? Yes, it's different in terms of elected leader rather than a royal born into the system, but what does it say if you're born with such immense power in both ways and you just straight up leave? There was no reason for her to do that in any moment. Like, what is there to stop you in upholding your oath to Arendelle and protecting the forest, like I said from before? It's not like Arendelle isn't known throughout the world where that is the best advantage to the Nostalgia and the Enchanted Forest. That domain can be more protected than whatever she did attempt to do because she felt free, I guess. Of course, now comes the time to wait and see what they'll do with her character in the future movies, now with her position that is yet to be seen. But for now, in the context of all of this still remains to be a bad decision. She did not do good, and she has never done good. It is a poor example of a leader you do not want to be ruled by, where the reality of reactions to her decision would be one of shock and divisive fury. The powerful Snow Queen who protected you is now gone off to the forest wherever she is. And I cannot imagine something more dangerous than what she did here. She initially left Arendelle in the first place after initial reactions to her fearful ice powers. This is the most most scariest thing a citizen can ever face despite her noble intentions. A Snow Queen running wild in the forest next to your kingdom is the last thing I'd think of to be safe. What if her intentions are against my own? As in, what if my goals are different from hers? What would she do with me? That would be a threat and something I would still fear, completely negating the whole lesson of Elsa in the original Frozen, that she was afraid of people fearing her, and this can only contribute to it and effectively make her the same bad antagonist that the Snow Queen Kai dealt with in what it turned out to be. Now, this isn't to say it would be like that at all, because it's up to who writes the story, but that is certainly a real concern to be noted, and you cannot ignore that. And ignore all the other concerns of Arendelle's governance, where the story is held up more by rope than any other Disney story that has ever been built, full of contradictions and things I would never want to live with. However you may feel on this, if you agree or disagree, this is just simply a fact of once you start, you cannot stop. That once you make a decision in your world, it makes you question other things or decisions without a thorough explanation on their part, where the story just starts to fall under its own weight. And what my goal here was just to present you with truths that happen in reality, that how a hero's journey or message of follow your heart becomes harder for those in power rather than out. Every Disney character before Elsa you ever saw married or was already in power. They never went out. They changed their systems a bit to marry a man or want something else or other reasons, but they never stepped down from power because, well, humans rarely do. So the lesson learned here is when you make a movie about a ruler, make sure you actually justify your reasons and build up before you start to leave, or else it will start to look bad and make you look like you made the wrong choices from the people who put you there in the first place. I'm all done, and I'm never letting go of this fact. Goodbye.